Welcome to Whispers of Crime, where the shadows of evil never rest. Join me as we dive into one of the most terrifying stories in American history, the BTK killer. A monster who lived among society for 3 decades, binding, torturing, and killing without leaving a trace. How did an ordinary man turn into an invisible predator, spreading fear and terror throughout an entire community? In this series, I'll take you deep into the mind of BTK, from his taunting letters to the chilling moment of his capture. This is not just a hunt for a criminal, but a battle between light and darkness, between truth and fear. Follow this gripping and mysterious story, where every step uncovers a more horrifying truth. The sky is overcast. Chilly winds sweep through the historic homes of Wichita, Kansas. Every street corner is cloaked in the darkness of night, creating a cold and desolate atmosphere. Perhaps only the hurried footsteps of a few people on the streets can be heard, rushing home before night fully falls. In that darkness, there is another presence. He is not in a hurry. His footsteps are calm, silent, as if he merges with the surroundings. He is the ghost of this city, a figure that no one recognizes, yet everyone fears. Dennis Rader, the man of darkness, has begun his hunt over 30 years ago. With no trace, no clue, he has left both the police and the community reeling in despair. He is known as BTK, a chilling acronym standing for Bind, Torture, Kill. This name is etched in the minds of anyone who hears it, not because of its brutality, but because he is completely invisible, never leaving a trace leading back to himself. His life appears as ordinary as anyone else's. A model father, a diligent civil servant, but behind that perfect facade lies a monster. Tonight, he has chosen a new target, a small house deep in the neighborhood, just a few blocks away from his own. The lights inside are still on, and through the window, he sees the image of a family gathered together. A couple and their 2 children. He knows all about them, every little detail, because that is how he operates. BTK does not choose his targets randomly. He watches, learns, and waits for the perfect moment to strike. The Miller family is in the prime of their lives. The husband, David, is a successful architect, while his wife, Sarah, is a preschool teacher. They live in a small but cozy home, where every evening the family gathers in the kitchen to cook and talk about their day at work. However, from somewhere in the dark night, a figure is silently observing. He knows all the habits of this family. He has read every article about them in local newspapers, tracked their movements weekly, and now he knows that the time has come. That night, BTK sneaks into the Miller home like a ghost. No sound, no trace. The nightmare for the Miller family begins from that moment. When David awakens, he finds himself tightly bound to a chair in the living room. Sarah, sobbing uncontrollably, is tied to another chair. Their 2 small children have been taken away. BTK, with a cold face, utters not a single word. Bind, torture, kill, is what he silently chants in his mind every time he makes his move. A twisted game that only he understands. While the police piece together fragments of the case, they find no concrete clues. Everything points to the chilling perfection of a serial killer. No fingerprints, no DNA, no evidence whatsoever, other than the bizarre letters he sends to the police and the media. Detective Thomas Grant sat at his desk, staring intently at the investigation board hanging on the wall. The crime scene photos, every small detail, every cold gaze from the forensic team, all seemed to mock him. Once again, BTK had resurfaced, yet left no trace behind. This drove him mad. For years, he continued to kill, while they, the seasoned police officers, were no closer to capturing him. No fingerprints, no DNA, no witnesses. It's as if he's a ghost, Grant muttered, his hands trembling with frustration. He had pursued many brutal murder cases, but BTK was a beast he had never faced. He was not just a serial killer, he was a master of evasion. What troubled him most were the letters BTK sent. They were not merely taunting words, but a sick game where BTK reveled in boasting about what he had done. He detailed how he had bound, tortured, and killed his victims, with the self-satisfied tone of someone who considered himself invincible. Does the latest letter have anything different? Grant turned to ask the assistant holding the file. Nothing noteworthy, sir. Just a list of brutal details about the Miller case, like before he left no identifiable marks. Grant sighed, leaning back in his chair, his eyes fixed on the photo of the Miller family. There was something hidden, a truth he had yet to see. But he felt that BTK was playing a game with him, and that very confidence could be his weakness. In his small house, Dennis Rader sat silently in front of his computer, typing each key with a chilling focus. He was composing his next letter to the police. He enjoyed how they were bewildered, how the things he wrote could disorient them, while he comfortably continued his double life. They will never understand, he thought. They will never catch me. Dennis was not just a cold-blooded killer. He was also a psychological tactician. He knew how to turn the tables, leading the police to chase false clues. He found pleasure in controlling the situation. This game was not just about killing. It was about the feeling of having life and death in his hands. He looked at the screen, his eyes lighting up as the words appeared. "Hello, Detective Grant. How are you feeling? I just wanted to say that I've enjoyed reading about your desperate efforts. But don't worry. This game is far from over. I'll give you another clue. But remember, nothing is real." Dennis laughed coldly, satisfied with his letter. Everything had been meticulously prepared. And he knew that soon enough the police would once again fall into his labyrinth, a labyrinth with no exit. A week later, the police received a new letter from BTK. Grant and the investigation team immediately analyzed every word, every sentence, hoping to uncover a clue they had missed. But BTK was too cautious, too meticulous. Nothing in the letter brought them closer to him. However, Grant began to feel that something was off. BTK was clearly intelligent, but in this letter, there was an incongruous detail, a short line mentioning a local school. "He has never referenced any location so clearly," Grant remarked. "This could be a clue or a trap." Not wanting to miss an opportunity, Grant dispatched a team to the school mentioned in the letter. They reviewed all the cameras, interviewed staff and students, but nothing stood out. Everything seemed to lead to a dead end. Yet Grant couldn't shake the strange feeling. Why a school, he wondered. Why would he reveal such a detail? Despite the lack of concrete evidence, Grant decided to investigate further. He knew that even a small oversight could be BTK's weakness, and that could be the turning point in solving the case. Grant was not willing to dismiss his instincts. He knew that criminals like BTK were always careful with details, but this time it seemed like he was doing something unusual. The investigation team continued to analyze the letter meticulously, even using language analysis technology to uncover any hidden signs. Then one day, while reviewing the files of previous cases, a team member discovered a commonality they had overlooked. Near almost every crime scene of BTK, there was always a public facility like a school or library. This could indicate an area he was familiar with, where he could blend into the crowd without raising suspicion. "We can narrow down his operating range," Grant said, his eyes bright with a new sense of hope. "He's playing a game, but this time it seems we're getting closer to the target." Grant ordered the investigation team to check all security cameras at schools and public facilities in the area they had narrowed down. Among thousands of images and videos, they discovered something noteworthy. A middle-aged man with an ordinary appearance who frequently appeared near these facilities. He didn't attract attention, but his presence near each scene was an undeniable coincidence. Grant sensed they were on the brink of catching the predator. But the problem was, they still lacked enough evidence to charge him. That meant they had to wait. BTK had no idea that the investigation team had started surveilling him. Dennis Rader, the man they suspected, continued to live his normal life as before. He worked, attended church, and cared for his family, all the things that made him a model citizen in the eyes of those around him. But behind this facade of normalcy, he continued to write. BTK felt he could not stop. The control and power he gained from each murder and each letter sent to the police made him addicted. Dennis did not realize that this very desire for control would be his final misstep. On a Saturday, he penned yet another letter, this time directly to a local reporter. The content was still meticulous descriptions of how he committed the murders, but it was accompanied by a self-satisfied question. "Will you ever catch me?" But this time, he was overconfident. He sent the letter from his own computer, unaware that investigators had installed monitoring software on the network systems in the area. When the letter was sent, the police had enough evidence to trace his IP address and location. Grant stood before the screen, watching every detail from the tech team. The screen displayed the location of the email, pointing to Dennis Rader's home. "We've got him," Grant whispered, a wave of relief flooding his chest. Finally, after 30 years, BTK was about to be apprehended. Immediately, the SWAT team was deployed. They couldn't let anything slip that might alert Rader. Everything had to be done carefully, giving him no opportunity to escape. In the meantime, Dennis Rader remained completely oblivious. He thought he was still in control, that no one could find him. But little did he know that as he returned home from the supermarket that afternoon, a fleet of police cars surrounded his neighborhood. Grant stepped out of the car, his heart racing. This was the moment he had been waiting for all these years. He approached Rader's front door and knocked. When Rader opened the door, he was met with a line of armed police officers. The confidence drained from his face. In that moment, BTK knew his game was over. At the police station, Dennis Rader sat quietly. He no longer exuded arrogance. BTK had been exposed, no longer an invisible ghost, but a normal man with terrifying flaws. Grant sat across from him, observing every gesture closely. "Why?" he asked, his tone neither heavy nor angry. He just wanted to understand what had turned this man into such a monster. Rader looked at Grant, his eyes vacant. "I did it because I enjoyed the feeling of control," he said coldly. "I liked how they were afraid. That feeling made me alive." Grant listened to his confession, acutely aware of the distortion in BTK's mind. He was a ruthless killer, but deep down, he was just a person tortured by uncontainable urges. Yet for Grant, there was no justification that could excuse the horrors BTK had wrought. The story of BTK did not end with a gunshot, but with a sentence. Dennis Rader was sentenced to life in prison, with no possibility of parole. He would spend the rest of his life in a small room, where his only remaining control would be the time he could look out the window. Grant stood outside the courthouse, gazing at the deep blue Kansas sky. Relief gradually filled his mind. A part of him wanted to celebrate this victory, but another part did not. He had been captured, but the families affected would never return to their former selves. And even though BTK was locked away behind bars, Grant knew that many other BTKs existed out there, and the battle against darkness would never cease.